Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling network security, but maybe from a slightly unusual angle.
Oh,
Yeah, instead of wading through endless documentation, we're actually cracking open a professional certification exam, specifically the FCSS NSE 7.4.
okay. Using an exam as our source material. Interesting.
Now, why an exam? Well, these practice questions, they're really laser focused on the core workings of network security, particularly within FortiOS 7.4.
Right.
So think of this as maybe a shortcut to some really practical insights, whether you're actually prepping for the cert or just want a clearer idea of how network protection works.
That makes sense. It's less about test prep itself and more about um, using these well-crafted questions, which often reflect real-world stuff, right?
Right.
Using them as a kind of framework to pull out useful knowledge about the actual security principles. We're digging into the why behind the answers.
Precisely. Getting insights that go beyond just, picking A, B, or C.
Yeah. And just for context, this exam, it's got 40 multiple choice questions, 75 minutes, some single, some multiple answers, all in English.
Good to know. Okay, so let's get started. What's our first question?
All right, first up is policy-based routing, or PBR.
Okay.
The question is, what happens when a packet's destination IP address matches a policy route? Options are ignore it, forward based on the policy, drop the packet, or do a DNS lookup.
Okay, so if it matches a policy route.
The answer is B. It forwards the packet based on that policy route. And what's, kind of interesting about PBR is how it changes the game for standard routing decisions.
Yeah, usually the router just looks at its main routing table, finds the best path, and off it goes.
Exactly.
But PBR sounds like a specific instruction saying, nope, ignore that for this packet.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a special rule that overrides the default behavior.
Okay, so can you give us a scenario, like when would you actually use this kind of override in a real network?
Sure. Think about guest Wi-Fi. That's a classic example. So for security, even if a guest tries to reach something internal, maybe a website, that technically has a direct route through your main network.
You probably don't want that.
Exactly. You might want to force all their traffic out through a separate, maybe more restricted internet connection, or perhaps through a specific security stack for extra monitoring.
Ah, I see.
PBR lets you set up that specific path, that detour, based on where the traffic is coming from, like the guest subnet, regardless of what the normal routing table says is efficient.
So it's about enforcing security zones, really, controlling the flow.
Precisely. It's context-aware routing for security.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, moving on. Question 2. This one's about sessions. In what situation is a session helper assisted? Options are static NAT involved, protocol needs dynamic port negotiation, session bypasses UTM, or it's in an SSL VPN tunnel.
Right. The answer here is B, when a protocol requires dynamic port negotiation.
Dynamic port negotiation.
Yeah, and this really touches on something important about how firewalls handle, all the different ways applications talk on a network.
So what exactly is a session helper, and what kinds of protocols need this help?
Okay, so some protocols, especially older ones like FTP or multimedia stuff like SIP for VoIP calls or H323.
Right, the voice and video ones.
Yeah, they don't just use one fixed port. They might start on a known port, say port 21 for FTP control. But then for the actual data transfer or for other control signals, they negotiate new ports on the fly. Dynamically assigned ports.
Ah, okay. And a basic firewall might just see that first connection and block the later ones.
Exactly. A traditional stateful firewall, only looking at that initial connection, might see traffic suddenly appear on these unexpected dynamic ports and block it, breaking the application.
So the session helper is smarter than that.
Right. It understands these specific protocols. It's like it knows FTP is going to do this. It watches the initial control connection, sees the negotiation happen where the client and server agree on, say, port 50,000 for the data transfer. And the session helper tells the FortiGate, hey, it's okay to allow traffic on this port 2. It's part of the same FTP session. It dynamically opens the pinholes needed.
So they're like specialized interpreters for these tricky protocols.
That's a good analogy. Yeah. Though it's worth mentioning, as protocols get more modern, maybe encrypting their control channels, these traditional session helpers can sometimes struggle. You might need deeper inspection, more application-level intelligence then.
Interesting point about how security has to keep evolving with the protocols. Okay, question 3. This one's about threats. Which feature specifically blocks access to known phishing websites?
Okay.
Options: web filtering, application control, DNS filter, or SSL inspection.
And the answer is A, Web filtering.
Web filtering.
Yeah, and modern web filtering is pretty sophisticated. It's not just about blocking categories anymore.
Right, it's more than just saying no social media at work.
Exactly. I mean, category blocking is still a big part of it, sure. But the key part for phishing is when it's tied into threat intelligence feeds, like FortiGuard.
Ah, the constantly updated lists.
Precisely. These feeds have huge databases of known malicious URLs, including sites used for phishing campaigns, malware distribution, you name it.
Okay.
So when you try to go to a website, the web filter checks the URL against this database, like in real time. If it's on the bad list,
Blocked.
blocked. You don't even get to the dangerous page. It's a really critical first line of defense.
Yeah, like a bouncer checking an ID against a blacklist before you even get in the door. That seems super important with how common phishing is.
Absolutely. Blocking at the web gateway level, preventing that initial access, is hugely effective in reducing risk.
Okay, question 4 shifts gears a bit. User identity. How does FortiGate identify users when it's in FSSO mode?
FSSO, Fortinet single sign-on.
Right, options are IP and port, LDAP group membership, MIC address, or last login time.
The answer is B group membership from the LDAP server.
Okay.
And this really highlights how you can integrate user identity with your network security rules.
So for someone maybe not deep in the weeds, what's FSSO actually doing? And why is identifying by group membership useful for admins?
Good question. So FSSO, Fortinet Single Sign-On, it lets the FortiGate figure out who is using a particular IP address on the network without making them log in directly to the firewall all the time.
Ah, so seamless identification. How?
It usually works by talking to your directory service, like Microsoft Active Directory, using LDAP. It monitors login events there.
Okay.
So when a user logs into their Windows PC, Active Directory knows who they are. The FSSO agent tells the FortiGate, hey, the user J. Smith just logged in, and their computer's IP address is 192.168.1.19.
Right.
And crucially, it also gets the user's group memberships from Active Directory, like J. Smith is in the marketing group and the VPN users group.
I see. So the FortiGate doesn't just see an IP address, it sees J. Smith from marketing.
Exactly. And that's powerful because you can then write firewall policies based on those groups. So you can say, allow anyone in the marketing group to access the marketing file server, or only allow users in the VPN users group to connect via SSL VPN.
Regardless of their current IP address.
Precisely. It makes managing policies based on user rules much, much easier than trying to track individual IPs all the time. Big benefit for admins.
Yeah, that sounds way more manageable. Okay, question 5 gets into ephemeral sessions. Which 2 conditions cause a session to be classed as ephemeral?
Okay, 2 answers needed here.
Options: a UDP packet sent with no reply seen, a TCP session in FinWait, an incomplete TCP handshake, or web filtering is turned off globally.
Right, the 2 correct ones are A, UDP without a reply, and C, incomplete TCP handshake.
Ephemeral. Sounds temporary, maybe unfinished.
That's exactly it. An ephemeral session is basically a transient connection attempt that FortiGate sees, but it's not confirmed as a full, proper two-way conversation.
Okay, so why does UDP with no reply count?
Well, UDP is connectionless, right? It just sends packets. So if the FortiGate sees a device, send out a UDP packet. But it never sees any UDP packet coming back to that device on the related ports within a certain time.
It assumes nothing really happened.
Pretty much. There's no confirmation the communication was successful or even established. So it marks that initial attempt as ephemeral.
And the incomplete TCP handshake, that sounds more obviously broken.
It is. TCP needs that three-way handshake to start.
Yeah.
SYN, SYN, ACK, ACK.
Yeah, right.
If the FortiGate sees the SYN go out, maybe sees the SYN, ACK come back, but never sees that final ACK.
The handshake failed.
Correct. The connection wasn't fully established. So again, that attempt is marked ephemeral.
Why is tracking these ephemeral sessions important?
Well, for troubleshooting, definitely, but also for security, like a huge spike in incomplete TCP handshakes hitting your server. That could be a SYN flood, a type of denial of service attack. Seeing lots of UDP with no reply might indicate scanning activity. So understanding them helps spot potential issues.
Got it. Patterns in the almost connections. Okay, question 6, VPNs. Specifically, IPsec VPN tunnels. Which statement is accurate?
Okay, IPsec fundamentals.
Options: no static route usually needed. Phase 2 is for peer authentication. Phase 1 establishes the secure channel, or dynamic IPs aren't allowed.
The correct one here is C. Phase 1 of IPsec is responsible for establishing the secure communication channel.
Phase 1, Phase 2. Can you quickly break down what these phases are doing in an IPsec VPN? What's Phase 1 all about?
Sure. So when two VPN gateways want to connect, they go through this two-phase negotiation. Phase 1, also called IKE, Internet Key Exchange, is job number 1. Build a secure, encrypted, and authenticated tunnel between the gateways themselves.
Okay, the infrastructure tunnel.
Exactly. They agree on things like what encryption algorithm will we use, what hashing method, and critically, they authenticate each other using pre-shared keys or certificates, whatever. They need to prove they are who they say they are.
Right, trust establishment.
Yeah. The end result of a successful Phase 1 is this secure channel just for the gateways to talk securely.
In phase 2.
Phase 2 happens inside that secure Phase 1 tunnel. It's where they negotiate the security rules for the actual user traffic that will pass through the VPN.
Ah, the encryption for my data going to the remote office.
Precisely. What encryption and authentication will be applied to your specific data packets. So, Phase 1 is the secure road. Phase 2 defines the security for the cars driving on it.
That's a helpful analogy. And just quickly on the other options, you often do need static routes for VPNs, right?
Often, yes. You usually need to tell the router how to send traffic destined for the remote network into the tunnel interface. So A is generally false, and D is definitely false. IPsec works fine with dynamic IPs, often using things like dynamic DNS.
Okay. And B was wrong because authentication is mainly phase 1.
Correct. Authentication is fundamental to Phase 1.
Great clarification. Okay, question 7. Hardware. The MP6 network processor? What's its main job in a FortiGate?
Ah, the MP processors. Hardware acceleration.
Options. Antivirus scanning, speeding up PBR decisions, offloading session processing for better throughput, or handling logging.
The answer is C, offloading session processing for enhanced packet throughput.
Okay, so it's a special chip. What does offloading sessions actually mean for performance?
Right. So the main CPU in the FortiGate has a lot to do, right? Running the OS, security checks, routing lookups, managing everything.
Yeah, sounds dizzy.
Keeping track of every single network connection, who's talking to who, on what ports, is the connection established, etc. That's called session processing. And it takes CPU cycles, especially when you have thousands or millions of sessions.
I bet.
The MP6 is a dedicated piece of silicon, an ASIC, specifically designed to do that session handling job for IPv4 traffic really, really fast in hardware.
So it takes that load off the main CPU.
Exactly. Frees up the main CPU to focus on the more complex tasks, like deep inspection or VPN encryption. The result is the FortiGate can handle way more traffic much faster with lower latency.
It's like having a dedicated traffic cop just for managing the flow, letting the detectives do the investigation work.
That's a pretty good way to think about it. Specialized hardware for a high-volume task.
Makes sense for high-performance security. Okay, question 8. The bigger picture. Fortinet security fabric. Need 2 true statements here.
Right, the fabric concept.
Options. All devices need FortiCloud registration. FortiTelemetry is the communication protocol between devices. Security rating is built in. Fabric only includes FortiGates.
Okay, the 2 correct statements are B, FortiTelemetry is the protocol enabling devices to share status, and C, the security rating feature is a built-in capability.
So the security fabric, the basic idea is getting different Fortinet products to work together better.
Precisely. It's their architecture for integrating various security devices, FortiGates, FortiChannelizers, FortiSandbox, endpoints, whatever, so they can share threat intelligence and coordinate responses.
Okay. And FortiTelemetry is how they talk.
Yeah, that's the underlying proprietary protocol they use to exchange status, threat info, logs, configuration snippets, all the stuff needed for them to act as one cohesive system.
Got it. And the security rating, what's that?
That's a built-in feature within the Fabric view, usually on the FortiGate or FortiManager. It analyzes your Fabric device's configurations and settings against Fortinet's best practices.
Ah, like a health check.
Kind of, yeah. It gives you a score and specific recommendations, like you should enable this feature, or this policy could be more secure. It helps you audit and improve your security posture across the integrated devices.
Useful. And just to clarify the wrong answers, FortiCloud isn't strictly required for the Fabric, right?
Correct. It adds management and logging features, but the basic Fabric communication can work without it. And the Fabric definitely isn't just FortiGates. Integrating other products is a key part of the value.
Right, wider integration. Okay, question 9. High availability, or HA. What's the main thing that happens during an active-passive HA failover?
Keeping things running when one box fails. Critical stuff.
Options. Email alerts go out, sessions drop, and passive unit reboots. Passive unit gets promoted to active. Cluster switches to standalone mode.
The core action is C. The passive unit is promoted to become the active unit.
Okay, so in active-passive, you have 2 devices, but only one is working at any given time.
Sort of. One is designated active, It handles all the live network traffic. The other is passive. It's basically on standby, listening.
Listening for what?
It constantly monitors the active unit's health, usually via heartbeat signals over dedicated links. It also keeps its configuration synchronized with the active unit.
Okay, so if the active one suddenly goes offline.
If the passive unit stops hearing those heartbeats or detects a critical failure on the active unit, it assumes the active unit is down.
And then?
It automatically takes over. It promotes itself to become the new active unit and starts processing the network traffic. The goal is a seamless or near seamless transition so users don't experience an outage.
Minimal disruption, that's the whole point.
Exactly. Resilience and uptime. The other options don't describe that core failover process. Alerts might happen, but that's not the primary action. Dropping sessions and rebooting is generally what you avoid, and switching to standalone defeats the purpose of HA.
Right, maintaining service continuity. Okay, last question, number 10. Diagnostic logs. What's their main role or purpose in FortiGate?
Digging deeper than the standard logs.
Options. Mainly show real-time CPU metrics, particularly useful for SSL VPN issues, not stored unless disk logging is on, primarily shows scheduled task events.
The best description here is B. They were particularly useful for troubleshooting issues related to SSL VPN connections.
Okay, so how are these diagnostic logs different from the everyday system event logs or traffic logs?
Regular logs give you a good overview: traffic allowed, denied, system events, threats detected. Diagnostic logs are much more verbose and detailed about specific internal processes.
More granular.
Much more. You usually have to enable them specifically for a feature you're troubleshooting, like SSL VPN, or maybe routing protocols like BGP or authentication processes.
So if someone's having trouble connecting to the SSL VPN.
Right. You might turn on the SSL VPN diagnostic logs. They could then show you, step by step, the negotiation process, where it's failing, specific error messages from the SSL engine, details about certificate validation, user authentication steps, much deeper insight than standard logs provide.
Stuff you wouldn't normally need, but crucial for debugging tricky problems.
Exactly. They are for targeted troubleshooting when the standard logs aren't enough. While option C about storage can be true sometimes, they can generate a lot of data and might not be logged to disk by default long term. Their primary purpose is that detailed troubleshooting, especially for complex features like SSL VPN.
Do you think are really critical for an admin to grasp to keep things truly secure and running smoothly?
That's a great question to ponder. The hidden interactions.
Yeah, something for you, the listener, to think about too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.